All right, so we're back with Laura Brand, the serial killer whisperer, for this week, and we have more Bittaker recordings. Laura has so many recordings with Laurence Bittaker. We've been going through these recordings. I can't believe how much you got him to talk.
I know.
Yeah.
It's not only Bittaker. I mean, she has like 25,000 hours of audio recordings.
25,000 hours. And and I haven't even uploaded the last 8 months of like dismantling of Death Row.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
yeah.
I know. But before we get into it, I just want to let our listeners please subscribe to our channel. It's really important. Also drop us reviews. It's really important for us to kind of gather steam and create a larger audience, because we got so much more great content coming down the road here. And with all the podcasts that we're doing, especially with Laura, and we have hopefully we're going to have some exciting news for you guys regarding Laura on some of the things that we're developing with Laura. So with that said, Laura, tell us what we're about to listen to right now with Bittaker.
And it's always a bag of a surprise with Bittaker. This is one of the early tapes with Bittaker. I'm kind of like trying to go in sequence with him for all the listeners, because you're going to see the progression as we keep going with him. So this is me I start off, okay, so there was one tape before this, and, I ask all of the serial offenders, why did you have to kill? Like, why didn't you stop at the rape? And I was pushing Bittaker on the subject matter, and I said, why didn't you wear a mask? Why didn't you blindfold them? And, he's giving me all these excuses. So the tape kind of starts off with that conversation of, okay, so the mask, the blindfold, like, keep going. And that's how it starts.
Wow. That's crazy. So when you were asking him initially, like, what was going through your mind at that point? I mean, were you prepared for the answer that he was going to give you?
I mean, it's always shocking. And I hear it from so many of them, but it's always like, oh, it's going to destroy the fantasy for me. It destroys the fantasy if I wear a mask. It destroys the fantasy if I blindfold them.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah.
It always seems to be that it comes back to this rich fantasy life that these killers have, that they want to make a reality. And there's no distinction between fantasy and reality for them. It all kind of melds together.
It really does. And I cut at the 8-minute mark of this one, because I had actually 2 serial killers on the line last night. And I said, I'm going through the tape and I want you to listen to it. Tell me what you think. So I played the whole 15-minute clip to them. And there was a part where Bittaker was in the van with one of the victims. And it's not what he did to the victim, but something he said to the victim that made them really cringe. And they were like, you got to bleep it. You got to bleep this. Just so disturbing what he said. So I stopped the tape at 8 minutes. I think we can play next week. I'll play the rest of it. I think I'm going to bleep that part. But he actually goes into more detail about the fantasy, about how he was actually directing Norris and the victims. And he liked to be that director, because he has this fantasy built in his mind that he's trying to recreate.
So let me back up. So you played this for some other serial killers, this tape?
She does it all the time to get their thoughts.
I didn't know that. I didn't know.
Psychopaths are they're very intuitive and very, I'll go to them with everything, just, they really do pick up on like intuitive, primal instincts that we have. So I always bounce back with them, especially other serial killers. They love to dive in and profile other serial killers. And it's funny because when they read the book about Bittaker Norris, they've all read, book 1 of Bittaker Norris. They've heard the tapes, they've seen the show. And to them, Bittaker Norris is another level. They're like, I might be a serial killer, but they're a different level. They're just, yeah.
Wow. So that's like straight out of Silence of the Lambs, what you're doing there.
Yeah.
It's exactly with Jodie Foster's character. She was going to him with files of the guys that she was chasing and getting, and basically guidance and expertise from the craziest serial killer alive.
Oh, I do it all the time with them too. And the 10-minute clip I sent you, you hear Wayne Adam Ford when he goes, I say to him, I go, well, you can't keep a body for that long. He goes, oh yeah, you can. He was actually profiling another serial killer an active one that I was looking into.
Wow. Wow. All right. Well, it's
such a bizarre world of psychosis.
Yeah.
I mean,
I guess every one of them thinks the other one is
worse, right?
Yeah. And then it's weird because they write each other. There is a serial killer network. Like from different states, they'll write to each other.
What do you think that's about?
It's like, it's with the, twosomes we see with BITTAKER, Norris, and all of them. It's like they have this, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like they can sense each other, and it's like they just, in prison, I've seen it. I've been, on the prison yard. I've seen them all, go together, like congregate, like they flock together.
In certain different groups.
Well, it's just like serial killers will flock together on the prison yard.
That's, so it's like any other social group, right? So you go on the schoolyard, then there's going to be different groups of kids. You go into the workplace, there's different groups of people that flock together. Right. So, birds of a feather flock together. That must be the reality here, that all these serial killers are flocking together because they have that common thread. Do they just sense it in each other?
They have to. And it's very weird because on San Quentin's death row, that's probably the last time we're ever going to see, so many serial killers all together at once. And I got to see it firsthand. And it was kind of weird because Bittaker and Clark and, Alcala, they would all, group together as like a clique. And it was like, if you could describe it, it was almost like a Mean Girls clique. Like they thought they were superior to the rest of like the inmates. Like you can't sit with us. Yeah.
Because of their intelligence level, or why?
I think that's what, to them. Yeah.
Because those three did have high, let me say that again. Those three do have high IQs.
They do. They're all near genius or genius. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess they have a lot in common in their sickness. So they think alike. That's crazy.
It's interesting though. It's social profiling, even amongst killers.
And it's weird because like they don't accept every serial killer in. Like they looked down on Ramirez. They thought he was too seedy for them.
Oh, okay.
Oh my God.
So there's like a class.
Yeah, there's actually like standards. Yeah. Bill Suff was not allowed in their crew because he was just not at the intelligence level they wanted. Ing wasn't allowed in either. They didn't like him. I don't even know how to describe it. They didn't like girls, but serial killers on the San Quentin yard.
Okay.
Yeah. Did they say why they didn't like Ing?
They never gave a reason for Ing, really. Bill Suff, they said he was dumb.
Is it because of the babies with Ing?
No. Look at Clark and.
I know.
Not that they killed babies, but they were killing, and
young people. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
So bizarre, but interesting. Interesting because you wouldn't think that. You would think that they would just all accept one another because
most of them did. Like most of them were in the same crew. Like Bonin was also in this crew. Kraft was in this crew. They just kind of like segregated like some of the serial killers. I guess they just didn't think was up to their standard of intelligence.
But reading the history of death row recently, I saw a lot of divisions within death row where the Aryan Brotherhood was born. There was different, they stayed together with their people. Like they didn't want to mix in with others. That's why it must be very difficult now when they're being thrown into general population. That's interesting.
Oh, yeah.
See how that's gonna.
Well, they segregate themselves within the general population too. You go out in the yard.
They do.
Right, but how are
out in the yards? They're all in their own groups.
But how are these serial killers going to be able to be accepted into those groups.
Well, a lot of my guys went to Vacaville, and the serial killers have already formed their own group at Vacaville.
Ugh. It's so horrifying. You can't even believe what we're talking about. I mean, but
Yeah.
trying to understand the psychology of it is interesting, because
It's
even
crazy.
people who have committed these depraved acts, they still have this commonality amongst them, which is why it's important to study them to understand what is causing them to do these horrific things.
Oh, yeah. And to be able to see them in groups. I mean, who gets to see them in groups and like what
No.
they talk about? Nobody.
No.
Nobody. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's unreal.
Okay. All right. Well, let's play this clip.
An inmate at the California State Prison, San Quentin,
Lawrence.
California. This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded. To accept this call, say or dial 5 now.
Okay, so you were saying you couldn't wear a mask, you couldn't blindfold them.
It's just a matter of pointing out kind of the obvious. Unless you go out of the state or out of the, at least out of the city, go down to San Diego or San Francisco.
It's just interesting to me, like, how you guys came up with this plan.
I didn't have to go to the mountain. I had the van. That was actually suspicion. Could have gone to the local Kmart parking lot, parked out on the edges of it,
The call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
Okay, so you had casually mentioned to Roy your sexual fantasy at CMC. I mean, did he ever casually mention his fantasy to you? Like, how did this all come about? How did this plan form?
Hold on a second.
Roy? Larry, there's nobody named Roy on your tier. Or a CO.
You want to pause it right there?
Who was he calling for Roy?
Yeah.
Okay, so he knew this is classic antisocial personality right here. Okay, so there is nobody named Roy on his tier. I knew every inmate on his tier and the tier above him. There's nobody named Roy. I even called 3 inmates after that, and they all confirmed there's no Roy. And when you're in prison, nobody goes by first names. Like if you call out for a CO, they'll say CO, or they'll go by like the last name, like Martinez. Nobody goes by first names calling out a CO. So I'm like, he's not calling out for a CO. That's weird. And then he said Roy. And I'm like, why is he doing this? And then it made sense. I don't know if this was definitely a manipulation tactic. I was wondering if he's trying to pretend like he was crazy, or to like, a red herring, throw something at me. So I'm like all confused, like, Roy, what are you talking about? I think he started getting uncomfortable with my line of questioning, and it seemed like he was saying like, oh, I don't have that much time on the phone. Like he was getting set up to like hang up.
Mm-hmm.
So I did pick up on that, and you'll see what I do to counteract that, because I could see, I'm getting to a place where he's just getting uncomfortable and he's about to just jump off. So, and this can happen when you start to pressure them and you go too hard with the questioning. And this is a great tape because you get to see how I counteract that.
Okay, cool.
Okay, where were we?
How we got from CMC making jewelry together in the wood shop to up in the mountains killing girls.
Yeah, I mean, that's did we ever talked about in detail about rapes and such? I told you no. We had somehow it came up, and I knew that was what we kind of get to.
Well, something you guys were talking about, sparked something in each other. Like somehow you guys came together.
Just it was so little he said, and it was so insignificant that I just don't remember.
Larry, I'm not coming at you. Like, don't think I am. I'm just trying to understand the progression from how we got from, making jewelry in the wood shop to this plan, and then taking girls up in the mountains, and they're getting viciously killed. To figure out what this progression was, and where it stemmed from, and how it actually happened, then maybe I can actually help other people from this, aid in prevention of this type of thing happening. If I had come across you at 16 or 19, you said you'd never had anybody that cared about you or anybody leading you in the right direction. If I could have the wisdom from you now, and then I meet a kid who's also going down that path, maybe I could help them. That's all I'm trying to accomplish here.
I guess basically pointing out maybe I can't say for sure what it's just so obvious. It's just so obvious. It's like the one he gave the ride to going to high school graduation. He pulls off the road and jumps on her. Anybody, you can't do that in traffic, or anybody's going to drive by or walk by. And if you did, you could overpower there. Somehow you got to tie her up in those confined quarters, and what can do? It's obviously you need more room.
I gotta stop you for a second because he starts. You beautifully kind of set him up and give him a place to kind of talk.
Yeah.
You state your intentions clearly to him.
And you see the dramatic shift in him, because then now all of a
Mhm.
sudden he's not like, oh, I don't know. He starts opening up. And, that's something you have to do a lot, is like once you see them kind of like closing up or shutting down, is you have to be able to shift them, back into that space where they want to open up, where they feel motivated to open up.
Yeah, no, and then he goes on to explain. What is he explaining there? I mean, it's like he starts rambling off, like
Rambling, really, yeah.
So
and he
what
gets
was he
you'll
describing
see.
there? What was he describing there?
I think he was just described. He started to like mumble about the plan with Roy, and then he mentions Kristen, because he says the girl from the high school graduation. Well, he just jumped on her, and he wasn't thinking. He was kind of putting down Roy, but that was Kristen who he was talking about. And then he said, "And how could you just do that when you don't have room? You have to tie her up in the car." He's kind of mumbling as he's saying this. He gets more clear as he starts going, and you'll see he gets very, very detailed actually and what he starts to say, which is quote unquote theoretically or fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not. He acts it out.
Yeah,
I'll let you guys determine, but yeah, I mean, a lot of what he's saying, like I said, I looked into the trailer with Shootman, I looked into the cabins that they all quote unquote fantasize about. They're all real. So it's scary, because you're like, is this fantasy or is this really real? Because these locations are actually real.
Yeah, I don't think any of it's fantasy. I mean, it's like, I think it was a fantasy prior.
Yeah.
I think, now it's reality. I mean, it's part of their history. It's part of, and now what they do is they relive it in their own fantasy, because now it's in their brain, and it's in their, it's in their brain bank, to where they can recall it whenever they want, to feel that same level of adrenaline rush and dopamine rush that they get when they actually did it. So it's not a fantasy anymore. It's just reliving.
I mean, it's very, you'll hear the rest of it. He gets very, very specific.
Yeah.
Very, very detailed.
Do you think that's just a genetic disposition that he has? That it's just the way he was born? Like,
yeah, well, no, I definitely think he definitely had, he was born with antisocial personality. And then, with the mother giving him up, and then the neglect, like I always say, it's always like a perfect storm coming together. And yeah.
Is it, or is it just the DNA?
I don't think it's just the DNA, but I would say with Bittaker's case, there was definitely a genetic component, because of just the reports I've read of him at 12 years old. That there's definitely a genetic component with him.
How I mean, because it sounds like he just starts when he opens up, it starts spilling out, and he almost can't control how fast he can talk about it.
He was a dam. Like once you were able to get in there and break them open, a lot of them were like that. Once you're able to just like get in, they are like dams. So they do just break open. It's like you have to find a way in. And I think what hit him hard with what I said is like, I'm just trying to help people. If I come across a 16-year-old kid, 19-year-old kid like you were, telling me you had no direction, nobody cared about you. I'm just trying to take your wisdom now. So if I find a kid who's, on his way to juvie or prison and I'm seeing the warning signs, maybe I could help him and lead him on a different path. And I think that hit a chord with him. And I think that's what helped kind of shift him in this moment. And I think it gained a lot of trust with him as well.
Yeah,
well, that's interesting because that would mean or suggest that there is a slice of empathy or a slice of something, or is it because he's just such a narcissist? He wants to be responsible for changing someone else's life or puppeteering something else from beyond the grave.
I would say, no, I'm going to say there is a little slice in there of some type of humanity, only because on his deathbed, he said, I want you to make me these promises. And one of the promises was just please be a good mother. He goes, I know Romeo doesn't have a father. Just please be a good mother. A child just needs one parent because I don't want him ending up a monster like me. If I just had one good parent, I wouldn't have become this. So he was like, and he was crying when he said this. So I do think that's why what I said triggered him too, is like, I feel like he always thought if he just had one good parent or somebody, directing him on a better path, I think it hit some type of chord within him.
Or is that just what he thinks you want to hear before he dies?
No, I mean, the other thing he made me promise was to find Cindy and Andrea. And I think,
it's just so hard. It's so hard for me to understand how someone could do such the most horrific things, like out of a horror movie to young girls like this, and then say it's because he didn't have a parent who loved him.
Well, I don't think that's the only reason, but I would say I've talked to Alan Pass about this because he's been on with many serial killers on their deathbed as well. And we've had a long talks about like our different experience of this. And he's had a lot of similar things. And, when you're faced with death, like, you're dying, like, this is your time, you're going to go. I mean, I can't even imagine what that's like for any human being. But then to know you have done the worst acts a person can do to another human being. So now you're faced with death and that on top of it. I think that is a way. I mean, if anything could break somebody open, I think that is the way, when you're faced with death yourself and you have to face that you caused death to innocent lives, that can't be, easy to like face and, especially when you're facing death.
Well, I just want to talk a little bit about, because you said he was on his deathbed and you feel like that's the main reason why he did that. But, there are cases like when we had Peter Vronsky on where that killer gave up information to the victim's family member there, and they went out and they found him. So I mean, there's a combination, and also Shermantine too. He has given up information that. So it's like,
and Chester gave it to you
and
too.
Chester just recently gave information up. So it's like Chester Turner. So it's like there's people out. I mean, it's not only motivated by death. I mean, what do you think the ones that are not dying that are revealing this information? What is their motive to do that? Is it they're looking to kind of prepare themselves for death, for when they have to meet their maker, and not knowing what's on the other side, whether or not they're God-fearing or whether or not they're, I mean, I would think that most of the people in death row and these people who commit these horrific acts, if they do believe in an afterlife, know they're going to hell.
I think every killer is so different. I think you just have to find what that underlying motivator is. And there was one serial killer who killed all of his victims but let one live. And when he was interviewed, they said, "Why'd you let her live?" And he said, "Well, she talked about her father having cancer, and I had a family member die of cancer." So I think there are chords within them too you can hit. And that's why I can hit them with, the ones that aren't faced with death now that are still giving information. It's all about just finding that chord. And once you get to know them and you're really studying them and, 10 years with them, you're going to find that chord and you're going to know, how to use it to extract the information to get these bodies. And that's how you do it. We all have chords. We all have something deeply personal. We all have something that triggers us. It's just about finding it and, doing it in a way where you're able to extract it. And they want to actually give it up to you as well, and it's not easy to get them to that place. I mean, it takes years sometimes. But it's really, you really just have to build that trust and rapport, which is what I've always said, that's just step one, to get to that place.
Which is why you're so gifted at this. I mean, there's no one I've ever met who can do the things that you can do with these killers. I've never seen anything like it before.
Well, and you're just very prolific at it too. And the fact that you're able to maintain an attention span for hours when these guys call you or when you go visit them, and to be able to kind of dissect and pull out the nuggets as you're doing it. That's, I mean, like I said, I was with you and we've been with you on calls. I've recorded you talking to these guys. I've actually been in the cage with you and it's draining. I can't imagine.
It's so draining. And especially like the in-person, I mean, your brain is like firing on every level because you're watching their body language, what they say, what they don't say, you're looking for. And this is actually a great tape to play because I harp on stuff that's kind of like in between the lines, which is a lot of times when you're interviewing the serial killers, they'll give you like a lot of clues in between, like some things they say that if you miss it, it's done. You're going to miss it forever. But if you're able to pick up on it, I mean, it makes a world of difference. And there's a clip coming up I'm going to point back to from this moment. And clearly, for the last 44 years, everyone had missed this part or this dialogue that both Bittaker and Norris had been giving. And I call him out on it at towards the end of the clip, I think it is.
Okay, just before we dive right back in the clip, there was a question I had right when we stopped, when we were talking about the fantasies. Now, the fantasies that they're having about raping and killing people, they kind of, when he's talking about them, and when we've heard him talk about it almost goes into the realm of fetishism. It's almost like it's like, now, what's the difference, the brain chemistry and mechanics from like someone who might just have a female foot fetish or, any kind of sexual fantasy? What is is it the same kind of thought process for someone like that than it is for Bittaker in regards to just the stakes are so much huger and, more tragic than something like that? Is it the same kind of thought process? Because when he talks about it, I can almost hear that level of excitement as he gets going.
It's so disgusting, to be honest.
Well, you got to remember, there's fetish and then there's paraphilia. Fetish can be healthy. Paraphilia is where it becomes a disorder, where it's unhealthy. Yeah.
So that's the other side of the continuum. That's where it tips over.
Yeah, it's a spectrum. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So obviously someone who has a foot fetish is,
they're not crossing into paraphilia.
They're not crossing. So it's not, okay. I just wanted to kind of clarify because it kind of sounded.
Right. A paraphilia is a disorder where it's going to, negatively affect you or another human being. It can be illegal. That's the spectrum. So there's things that might be a fetish, but doesn't mean it's necessarily paraphilia. Mm-hmm. That's a whole different line, someone has to cross.
Yeah. Well, that's a good distinction because I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that because it kind of, to me, it's like when you listen to it and you hear it, it kind of like sounds the same because it's the same kind of.
I think a lot of people associate fetish with paraphilias, and there's a lot of like Hollywood like kind of blurs lines between the two, but there is a distinction. There is a big distinction. It's not, a fetish is not a disorder. It's not something that needs to be treated. It's not something that's illegal. It's not causing harm to someone, or causing harm to yourself. That's the biggest thing.
Okay. All right, cool. Let's dive back in. Oop. Hold on 1 second.
Wagon and a van, take her someplace and do it. House, apartment, garage, whatever. All of it's just so simple, and I don't know why, it doesn't take you real far.
I know it might seem obvious to you, but it's not for me. I'm trying to just understand it. So I just implore you to be patient with me as I'm trying to, grasp everything and comprehend it.
Three-way call alert.
Well, how long are you going to take? Well, I would prefer that, but, it's just not practical. What am I going to do? I can't bring her where I'm living in a hotel. I suppose we could have rented a house somewhere, soundproof the garage, and, kept her there, install some plumbing. But what's that going to cost?
You were making a lot of money.
Well, I wouldn't make making that much. I'm only making $1,000 a week. It's, what you can accomplish easily and what take a lot more work to accomplish. Up here in those mountains, if you get back somewhere off the road, rent a small earth mover and haul it up there and take a big enough hole inside of one of the hills and go steal a small house trailer or, take it up there and bury it. Then you get to truck up water occasionally with a barrel. Every variation has its own problems. Most of them get pretty complicated, time-consuming, money.
You really tapped into something there, and this is how long into your conversation?
I still get chills hearing that one back because it's like I just hear it and I'm like, this sounds like experience rather than fantasy. And this is what I was talking about, I think, on the Shootman episode. Shootman, Bittaker, and Norris all talked about a backhoe, putting a trailer into like the side of the mountain. And then they were housed with the guys who took that school bus, and they would talk about, Bittaker told me, you put the railroad tracks on top so it doesn't collapse. And then he's talking about, you got to bring the water, and the plumbing. And he used to say to me, when you go up to the mountains, if you ever want to, look like sadists, I always say they love to burrow. I always say, look down, bunkers, basements, cellars, trailers, sadists, they like to bury their hedonism. I think that's what it really is. And because that's really, look at Lake. He had the same thing, the backhoe, putting the bunker in the side of the wall. And then Bittaker's describing almost the same thing with this trailer. It's really
so bizarre that they were all operating at the same time.
Same
time doing the same depraved things. So you think there's a bunker, not a bunker, let me say that again. You think there's a trailer buried out there somewhere?
I wonder. I really wonder. Because, I know about the caves with Bittaker and Norris, and, they tried to put Carlo talked about, Bittaker tried to make power tools to put chains and restraint in the caves. It just didn't work. So I had wondered if they had done the trailer on the side, because before they were arrested and caught, Bittaker was trying to get Norris to quit his job because Bittaker was making a lot of money. I don't know. You can look up what $1,000 a week was.
It was a lot.
It was a lot.
In the late, I would imagine, right? Like
in the early 80s. Yeah. It's like $4,000 a month. That's
in 79. Yeah.
Some people just make that today.
Right. He's like, it wasn't that much, but I think I actually did the calculate. It was hundreds of thousands of dollars he was making a year, and he wanted Norris to quit his job to start building an underground compound. And even Jackson came forward and said, yeah, they were working on the plans to do this underground compound. So,
Oh my God. Can you imagine if they succeeded?
Did they have like an end game as far how long they could possibly do this, or they was just kind of like, well, we're gonna, we're just because he was, he had like an engineer's mind. It seemed like he had like a real plan, and how far did he kind of calendar this thing out? How long did they think they could sustain this level of killing and doing it?
Bittaker would have went the rest of his life if he could have. He would have never ever stopped. And even Jackson, when he came forward about them, he even said, he goes, I know it sounds crazy. He wants Norris to quit his job and build an underground bunker. He goes, but you don't understand this guy's level of intelligence. If anybody could do it, it's him. And Jackson was right. I mean, just like Carlos said, he should have been working for NASA. It was just astounding. But it's like he's using this intelligence for evil. And but yeah, if there was anybody who could have built an underground compound, lair, whatever, it was Bittaker. He had floor maps. He showed me floor maps in the prison.
What kind of floor maps? What do you mean?
Like floor maps of like, here's would be where the captives are. Here would be where the plumbing is. Mm-hmm.
So like plumbing just so they can kind of rinse away the blood? Is that what it's for? Or
no, like he told, it's so sick. So he told me if I ever go up in the mountains and the things I should look for, he said one of the biggest obstacles you're going to come across when you take captives is going to be plumbing and like the air ducts. And I should always look around the roads and like for piping or air ducts or stuff like that if I'm looking for people who might be held captive.
That's an elaborate thought process. So like you said, like he's using his intelligence for this depravity, and he wasn't going to stop. He was creating a city underground in his mind where he was just going to keep doing this forever.
Literally. Yeah.
Okay. See, that I think is a little bit more. This is why I'm saying there's so much more research needs to be done into what causes this genetic disposition to turn someone into this. I understand, there's plenty of people who had terrible parents and were abandoned, were abused, were parents were drug addicts, all kinds of things. And they don't do things like this. So there's a very big division between what this person's doing and why he's doing it.
Not only that, too, you got to look at California, Los Angeles. Why is it well, we know because, why they're coming here. It's a feeding ground, but still, how are they all finding one another, too?
I know. We've talked about this. We're going to write our book about this because we think this is an interesting subject. It's very disturbing that at this point in time, there were so many operating in the same place.
And they knew each other, even on the outside.
They knew
each other.
Yeah.
It's insane.
It's insane.
Yeah. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about is because, it's like at what point does the human mind go over that side of the pendulum? And, because we've seen it time and time again. We're seeing it today. We see it in wars when men are, forced to be violent, and then they snap and they go even further. We're seeing it in the war in Ukraine. We see it in the stuff that happened with the Hamas terrorist attack in Israel. What they were doing, they actually videotaped themselves doing a lot of this killing and raping and brutalizing people. Where's that switch that where once you go, there's no going back? How far is that? When you're talking to all these serial killers, do they ever tell you about the moment where that switch was flipped and then they were like, now I can turn it on and turn it off anytime I want?
It's funny because they all call it a switch, just like you described it. Like once it switches, there's no going back. That's how they all describe it too. Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. I would imagine that once it's flipped, that's it for them. They can't go back.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's two wires in the back of the brain. Now women's are the female brain is different, but the men's is the sexual and violence. Think of it like right here. Okay. It's very easy for men's to cross. as where women's, it's much harder. It takes a lot of trauma for these, lines to cross. For men, though, they're right in the back of the brain, right next to each other. So it's easier for them to cross. It's easier for that switch to kind of go on. And the thing is, once they cross, there is no way to uncross them. Period. There's just no way.
Is that almost kind of like a Neanderthal thing that we've been kind of programmed with? Because, men instinctively have that compulsion to protect and protect themselves and either hunt or gather type, because it seems like it's really kind of primal.
I've noticed very primal traits with the serial killers. And, Peter Vronsky, actually, in his book, there is a theory that these serial killers could have, like they say there's a certain percentage that have Neanderthal still within their bloodline. Could the serial killers have that? I mean, it's a theory. I don't think it's been proven or tested, but it is a theory that is out there.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, let's listen to the last part of this.
Get caught in the meantime doing something or other.
The other day I was thinking about when you told me about that hunter that walked by the van when you had Jackie and Leah inside of it. And he just waved to you and walked by.
Well, we were both sitting, Roy was asleep in the driver's seat sitting there, so the guy, I don't know, he soon we pulled over to rest for the night and then got on the way again in the morning. And then they had a helicopter coming over later. Just one of them weird things. So much for being safe off in the fire road somehow.
Talking about the helicopter too. Recently I called up to one of the park rangers of San Gabriel Mountains, yeah. And those fire roads are not hunting areas. The hunting areas would actually be more by Crystal Lake, where the cabins are. That's where you would actually see a hunter. Those were hunting permitted grounds. And then they told me that there's actually a helicopter launch pad right next to the cabins up there. Are you sure you weren't at the cabin?
Nope. Yeah. Why?
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
The story about Leah is just so sad, like how she was able to figure out that trick lock and just get out. And, the bystander effect, nobody helped her or called the police.
Well, apparently they didn't see much of anything. That was, I think, the issue.
Stop for a second.
They just knew for...
Who's he talking about?
Leah.
Oh, that's what I thought. Okay.
Leah was so smart. I mean, she was an honor roll student. And after Norris hit her over the head, she regained consciousness and got to the door and actually figured out how BITTAKER had tricked it and was able to open it and jumped out. They were at Manhattan Beach in front of tennis courts at a park. I've tracked down the people at this tennis court at this park and spoken to them.
What did they say?
So they said it happened so quick. Like they could hear tires screeching because, BITTAKER slammed on the brakes.
Yeah, I remember that.
They all reported the same thing. Like they heard this girl screaming and the sliding door like slamming and just screeching at tires. They said it like happened so fast. Like they didn't think it was really anything at the time. Like nobody really called because it all happened within seconds. She opened the door, he slammed on the brakes, got out, hit her, put her back in.
Oh, that's
yeah.
so tragic. So close to getting out. And they didn't have cell phones back then, so no one could call,
And even if they did, I mean, things happen all the time, stuff like that. I mean, you're somewhere.
Well, he's going to say it in the next second, but he even addressed anybody who was watching as to why this was happening and how nothing was going on and why no one should call the cops. And he said, she's on acid. Like he
I remember
pretended
that.
like she was I don't know if it was a little sister or a niece or something. He was like, I'm just trying to get you home. And, in 1979 in LA, Manhattan Beach,
I know.
that, everybody was tripping, and
Right.
it wasn't uncommon to see something like that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important. If you see someone screaming in public, I mean, this has happened quite a bit. People just keep walking and they don't respond. And it could just be a panic, like your body is not registering what's happening. Sometimes it's dissociation
We're seeing it play out daily. We see people get attacked on the street, and like bystanders sit there and just stare and watch.
I don't
even
understand.
report
We
it.
have to do better as a society.
Yeah.
We have to.
We do.
We can't just, put blinders on and not pay attention to what's happening. We're all connected. We are as part of this planet. We're all connected, and you can't ignore other people's pain. Like if they're suffering or if they need help, we need to help them.
Yeah.
But I've seen it. It happened to me in New York City. I mean, I fell down the stairs in the subway and people walked over me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's in the subway. Yeah, I thought I broke my back.
Yeah.
People literally walked over me. It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And
it's insane.
But something like this, you see, this just happened over here where we live. There was a young girl walking along a road, kind of like some of these girls
This is a nice area.
And this is a very nice area where we live in the suburbs, and you just don't expect it to happen here. And someone rolled up on her, but she started screaming, and someone passing stopped and got involved. And then the person ran off. So it's really important to do that. I mean, I know it's scary, but we can't just ignore.
Well, like, a month ago, remember when we were in the supermarket, and I was sitting there at the Starbucks supermarket, and there was this creepy guy.
Oh my God.
Like hanging out there, and he had really bad energy. I could almost see it and feel it and smell it. And I was sitting there watching. I'm just on my phone, and I'm like not even looking at him, and I can hear his conversation with the young girl behind the counter, and he's like basically saying, why don't you ever give me your phone number? I come in here all the time. And she goes, well, I have a boyfriend. I can't give you my phone number. And he just kept on pursuing and pursuing. And the level of creepiness got even more. And then finally,
and we're like, why won't he just stop and leave her alone?
But
She's scared.
And then there was someone in front of me, another gentleman, and he said, hey, listen, I need to pay for this. And so the guy, it kind of jolted him at him, but he was like in a trance talking to her.
We were afraid he was going to well, of course, we're so hypersensitive, but we were scared he was going to follow her outside.
So, when I got up to the line, I go, listen, you handled that very well. And she goes, yeah, he comes in here a lot. I go, he comes in here a lot and he does this to you a lot. I go, have you told your bosses here? She goes, yes. He goes, but they haven't done anything. And so I was like, this girl, you could tell she was scared. Okay.
That reminds me of Lynette.
Yeah.
That's what Bittaker did with Lynette. He was
always at McDonald's. I know. And I says, so I go and I find the manager and I said, listen, I just witnessed something that your employees just experienced, and it's not the first time. And she's scared. I can tell that she's scared. I go, I'm just letting you know, I'm putting you guys on record that, this is happening and you should do something about it. Otherwise, I'm going to call somebody. I go, we don't know if this guy is going to be out in the parking lot waiting for, I went out there, I looked for him, and it's just, and that poor girl. I mean, I go, and she goes, yeah. And I get off in an hour, and he goes, and I'm regretting. He goes, I don't even have a boyfriend. He goes, but I just told him that.
I know I was scared for her. And I told her, so we know the people that run that place and they took care of it. So they have been vigilant to keep that guy out. But that's the thing. Like if we didn't say anything, who knows what would have happened? Because this guy has been tormenting this girl for months and no one stepped in to do anything. But that's the kind of behavior we have to watch out for. Okay.
That's
because that guy
behavior we have to watch out for. Yeah.
He was zoned in on her for whatever reason. He just zeroed in on her and he wasn't taking no for an answer. And she was young. She was like maybe 19 years old.
Yeah.
And this guy was in his 30s. Like there was no reason for him to be that aggressive with her, you know? So,
but I didn't even think about the Lynette thing. You're absolutely right. I mean,
that's exactly what happened to Lynette. That's all I could think when you're telling that story. I'm like, oh my God, it's Bittaker with Lynette, just going in and he won't leave her alone at her workplace.
Yeah. And it was just a level of questioning. It's just like he would like take it to a creepier question. It's like instead of like backing off, go, okay, yeah, no, I respect that. He kind of he doubled down.
He had bad energy.
And he went creepier. And it's just like,
it scared us both. So we both, you know, pursued finding out, making sure this girl was going to be okay and safe when she left. But that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Like, we have to be more vigilant. Lynette was working at McDonald's at the time.
Yeah.
This creepy old guy is coming in.
The thing is, like, especially, I think most people are looking for like a creepy, they always have like this image of a serial killer or a creepy guy. It's not going to show up like that. It's just going to show up as somebody like pushing someone's boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And if you see someone just being uncomfortable and this other person isn't letting up, that should cause concern just right there.
Yeah. I mean, because I've been around.
To be pushing the boundaries.
No, I mean, because, you know, I've been around guys. I had friends of mine that were, you know, players, and they had their lines with girls, and I would always, it always made me cringe. But at the same point, there was always that level of, you know, harmlessness that he was just kind of like, you know, if the girl didn't respond after the second line, they were like, okay, then they would move on. This guy was like digging in, and he wasn't going anywhere.
And didn't Bittaker do that too?
Yeah. Yeah. And I was just going to say, you know, when I have so many prison certifications like Priya, but the first one I did was they do boundary setting, because the inmates, they'll just like pounce on you sometimes. So they'll get in your space, and, you know, the certifications to teach you to be like, you need to back up. Okay. Like, and, you know, present that to them, because predators will just come right at you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about how, you know, and that's what you need to look for when you're, you know, just out in the world, is just people just, breaking those boundaries.
Yes. And do you think that it's because, I mean, this has happened to me so many times where people break their boundaries and they'll just come right up to me and say something creepy. But do you think that's because of a vibe that we're putting out? Like, maybe we're just putting out some weird vibe that we're open and not knowing it? Or is it just, or do they sense weak? Why are they pushing boundaries with certain people?
Well,
but I'm not a person.
No, but you and I,
Cindy,
you and I are empaths, though. So
yeah,
empaths attract. Yeah, we attract the worst of the worst. Like
But as far as from a man's perspective, all women, when they're that's prey. I mean, they for guys who think like that, you know, they know they can physically overpower them. They know they can do this. They know they can do that. So yeah, it's not like you have to be open. If a woman by trade, most of the time, by mere appearance, is, you know, she's vulnerable. She's vulnerable. Women are vulnerable. I mean, you know, a man, like an average man, can go take either you or Laura and dominate them. An average man, you know, and most women don't know how to defend themselves. Hopefully, in this day and age, people are learning, but most of them don't. I mean, you freeze in these situations. You've had a knife pulled to you, and you froze.
I did freeze.
Okay, you freeze in situations. A lot of women freeze.
I did freeze.
So it's like,
I think every woman should be carrying a weapon.
I tell her,
I haven't, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to use it in that moment. Like, I was on a shoot in Texas, and my other friend who was with me, another producer, she'll attest to this day. She can't believe what happened. And this guy that we were interviewing, he literally came up and pulled a knife like this big, literally this big, and pushed me into a room and held it up to my throat and was like, "You look like my ex-wife. I want to kill you." And I just stood there and didn't move. And the camera guy, luckily, jumped over a ton of boxes and grabbed him from behind, but I really froze. So I went, you know, did some like, I got to do some self-defense or whatever.
Still didn't help.
It didn't help. I don't know.
I give her, like, she goes running in the morning, and I says, make sure you take your blade. Make sure you take your blade. I always have to remind her. I says, because she's out on these trails, you know, I can't watch her 24/7, and you got to keep your, you know, eyes in back of your head, because she's got her headphones on and she's running and trying to have a nice exercise. And listen, that's what happened to that girl with the immigrant that just, you know, the illegal immigrant just recently.
Yeah, it's an illegal immigrant. Do that again.
No, I'm saying she's an illegal immigrant, someone who's an immigrant, you know, who came over here across the border.
All right, let's not go into this story.
But anyway, that's what happened to her.
Right. You know, well, one of my closest friends, her daughter is going to high school, and I just gave her a graduation gift, and I gave her some, well, I mean, she's a high school girl. So I gave her, you know, see what I carry in my purse and So it's not like too aggressive. It's kind of hidden too, which is perfect for a teenage girl. I have a lipstick knife that I carry. So it's literally lipstick, but it's a knife. And then I have a taser, but it looks like an iPhone. And they're pretty inexpensive. And I think everybody should have, some type of tracker on their phone that their family member has. There's necklaces now you can wear where if you press the button, it'll send a text to 5 of your closest people, and then they'll call you. If you don't answer, they know to call 911, something is wrong. There's so many devices and things that we can get now, and every woman should have something, even just like a necklace where they can press to call for help or something.
Yeah.
It's sad, but this is the world that we live in, and it's better to be safe than sorry. And I can tell you,
go ahead, finish. I'm sorry.
Working with the predators and the serial killers and seeing how they operate, seeing how they think, they never turn off. They are always hunting. There is no off switch for them. And they look like regular people. I mean, and they're everywhere. I hate to say that, but it's true. And every woman needs to understand the dangers out there, and everyone should have, some type of device, knife or something just to defend themselves.
I think about that every time I leave the house. I mean, I don't wear flip-flops when I go out ever, because I'm like, if something happens, how the hell are you going to run in flip-flops?
Well, listen, I'm not going to compromise my fashion all the time for this.
Let me finish what I was saying. But I'm thinking I always have a blade on me. I always have something in the car.
Just something, yeah.
Something that if something goes wrong, I mean, because we've seen it time and time again, it happens in a split second.
That's the thing.
Happens in a split second, and you got to be prepared to defend yourself or get out of that situation as fast as possible.
Yeah. There's even keychains now that sound off a massive alarm that can scare people off. I mean, there's little things that aren't even weapons that you can just be carrying, but
yeah, there's plenty of non-lethal stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to have something on you.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, you have to just be aware of your environment, and you have to really be vigilant about it. But and that being said, you don't want to live in fear either. So it's good to understand that these predators are amongst us, and to know and to be aware, but we can't live in fear. I'm still going to wear my high heels and flip-flops. I don't care. And you're
going to freeze.
I'm going to freeze. No, hopefully I'm not going to freeze next time, but
the biggest weapon that we all have is our intuition. Listen to your gut.
That's what I tell my kids. That's what we tell them.
Yeah. It's really true. We can sense the danger. Can. We're tuned in.
Your intuition is turned off when you're preoccupied, though. When you're on your phone and when you're distracted, and that's what they look for. They look for women that are loading their car with groceries.
That's true.
They're looking for people looking down, walking around the park, looking on their phones. That's when they get them. So that's the situational awareness that you have to have on top of when you're not paying attention. Don't be a young woman walking in a park alone and no one knows you're there. Tell someone you're going to be there.
I know. That's the thing.
Surround yourself. Walk next to another, a group of people. Don't be on by yourself. I mean, there's all these things. I remember I did this series, Fight Science, for National Geographic, and we did a whole hour just on situational awareness for people and learning how to seek out threat assessments while you're just walking down the street. If you talk to any kind of, law enforcement or special operator, special forces, when they go into a room, they never have their back to the door. They always have their face to the door. There's always a wall behind them. They're always like scanning the room to see and it's just a casual thing. There's a great scene in one of the Born Identities where he kind of explains his thought process, where he's making threat assessments decisions every second of the way. And it's a horrible thing you have to do. But if you do it, if you walk into a strange situation, you have that in the back of your mind, you're going to be better off, because at least you're not going to be taken off guard. But
and I think once you start doing it, just it'll just become natural. You'll start just going into rooms. Like I always sit with my back against, I'm always scanning the room. It just becomes a natural thing, and you don't even think twice about it once you start to do it. And it's just being hyper vigilant, And one thing, the serial killers made this for me at San Quentin. They gave me a pair of sunglasses, and they cut mirrors and they put them in the corners. So when you wear the sunglasses, you can see behind you.
Wow.
And they're so easy to make. So everyone should make them. And yeah, they gave me the glasses. They're like, now you can see behind you. So
do they wear them in the prison?
Mhm.
Of course.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's the thing. We can learn from these people. We can learn a
Right.
lot of things from these people and understand why they do some of the things that they do. Is there more, Bittaker?
There's a little bit,
All right, let's
yeah.
just hear what else.
But the fact that they're hyper vigilant like that.
It says, but I
And
thought what you said.
listen, they work great. I mean,
Oh, I'm sure.
I've used them ever since. Yeah.
I was thinking about that the other day. Like, I wish I had that because there's a creepy guy that's on the trail, and I'm always like worried he's going to be behind me when I'm running.
Like behind you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you don't have to look behind you.
I always hold my phone up and I'm like pretending I'm taking a picture. What was I going to say? Oh, you said something interesting that the serial killers are attracted to empathy or empaths like myself, like you, because it is literally like a big golden light over my head. That's like, oh, you're crazy. Come this way. And
Yeah.
I mean, you have the same thing. So what do you think that is? Why are they
I mean,
attracted to that?
I've asked people that because I'm always curious, like why empaths attract like narcissists and psychopaths, and I've heard it's the light, like they like
Yeah.
moths to a flame. They go
Exactly.
towards the
I
light.
see
Yeah.
people who have light. I mean, it's like anything else. When you have someone who has
Mhm.
a certain amount of magnetism, a charisma, or just kind of a good energy vibe or aura, I mean, I think all these things that we can't see, but we can kind of feel, like vibrations. I mean, Nicholas Tesla talks about vibrations and how, that's how we're all kind of organisms of vibrations and how we're affected
Right.
by it. I know everybody is, because if you listen to, that's why music is so helpful for people. And it's because it's
Right.
the vibrations. I mean, music, it just kind of, it controls animals. It controls everything. It controls
It does.
plants. You put music in front of plants and it controls them. So it's like, I think there's a lot of things we don't see and smell and feel that we can, that affect us, that we don't.
It's so true. I mean, music, it releases dopamine into our brain. I mean, we have a neurological effect from just listening to music and vibrations.
Yeah.
I mean, it's real. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think, especially with empaths like you and I, Cindy, the light, these are broken people. So of
Yeah.
course they're going to go towards the light, because
Mhm.
you're like,
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
For some reason.
I feel it.
All right, here's the last minute of this.
I stopped and somebody started to come out of the side door. They got back in and I picked up a couple things off the ground and closed the door and drove off. And, it wasn't really objectively suspicious. Really suspicious. So.
And that was when you turned to everybody, like, in the park and just said, she's tripping on LSD. I'm just trying to get her home.
Yep.
So was Leah in the van actually watching Jackie get raped?
Let's see. Yeah, everything. She was sitting in the back.
Is that it?
Yeah, this is the part the serial killers told me, cut it. Yeah.
Because it's
Yeah.
just too graphic.
No, it's not even graphic. It's not even something he did. It's something he said, but it made them
Got it.
cringe what he said. Yeah. So
Got it.
maybe next week we'll see. I'll send it to you guys.
Yeah,
first
I mean,
Yeah, I'd like to listen to it first.
I don't want to
before-
give ideas to anyone, and I don't really want to give a platform to anything that sadistic.
we
I
can
just,
believe it.
yeah,
'Cause,
I just,
mean, the next part I think is interesting because he does go into taking the pictures of Norris and for blackmail.
that's
is
what I want. Yeah, that
Interesting.
Yeah, we can get into that. We'll get that into
I
that
think
next time.
that's very interesting
very
because
interesting.
these
That's a new level of kind of evilness and just diabolicalness.
Yeah, now you're going after your own crime partner.
Oh, you're preparing
it's
for the
crazy.
end game. You're preparing for the end game.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what you're doing. It's like,
yeah.
yeah. All right. Well, listen, this has been
So interesting, Laura.
really interesting. And,
Yeah.
And I just can't believe that was so early on in your
Mhm.
relationship with him.
Very
And
early. Yeah.
information and kind of really kind of paved the way for all your work that you're doing right now.
And honestly, the way that you were able to reel him back in, most people would have just given up. Like they wouldn't have known how to get him back, because I could see how quickly you could lose him. You know, he would just shut
he
off.
was shutting down. I could tell he was shutting down. I was like, and maybe next week we can play the 10-minute ones I sent you of like the
Yes.
of all the serial killers kind of as a clip, because it's, what did you guys think when you heard that one?
I listened to it twice and I couldn't believe
I haven't heard it yet.
what you were able to do.
Yeah.
It's it's amazing work.
All right.
Yeah.
And we will release that shortly. All right, Laura, thank you so much. We'll see you next week.